Well, hello rally friends and welcome back to the kitchen table. Listen, it's a post-rally Sweden kitchen table, this one, but there is more than just Rally Sweden to talk about this time, isn't there? What should we kick off with? Should we kick off with Sweden or should we kick off with Hyundai? Well, I think what we're going to do, we're going to kick off with Hyundai. We'll come to Rally Sweden later on, but let's start with Hyundai. Really quite surprising news. Yesterday morning, what was that, Tuesday morning, there was no hint of this at Rally Sweden either. Don't forget, Hyundai have 4 drivers this year to choose from. Now, what we fully suspected was that Neuville clearly has a full season. What we'd heard was that Mikkelsen had a full season and that the third car would be rotated between Sebastian Loeb and Danny Sordo. Now, that wasn't such an easy rotation. The rotation between last year Sordo and Hayden Paddon was a very simple one because Paddon preferred the gravel, Sordo clearly preferred the tarmac. What you had this year potentially in Sebastian Loeb and Danny Sordo were 2 drivers who clearly, given the choice, would prefer to compete on the tarmac. So that rotation became a bit more difficult. It also became a bit more difficult in that had you left out either Sordo or Sebastian Loeb on the tarmac, you're leaving out, without any question, a potential rally winner. But we were led to believe that Mikkelsen would have the full season. Doesn't appear to be that way, does it? It really doesn't appear to be that way. It's all rather confusing, but what I have to say is it shows intent. It shows real intent from Hyundai, and in particular, Mr. Adamo, the man at the top. Let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Adamo. I remember when I first met him, probably over 2 years ago now. It was when he was appointed head of the new R5 project. And I sat in the offices in Alsnau, and Mr. Adamo was in his desk in the corner. In between us was one of the guys who was working on the R5 project. And I thought, my goodness me, what a scary man. He was a man who had authority about him. It was a man who quite clearly was not to be messed with. Even in the morning that I sat in that office, I could feel that, really, that energy and that determination and focus coming out of the man. And as I say, he was actually quite scary. What I think I discovered in that morning was that he's a man who makes decisions, and he's a man who seems to stick to his decisions. He has conviction in his decisions. Now, I think Mr. Adamo, who, let's not forget, inherited this situation. I asked him directly, was the Loeb deal, was the Sordo deal done before you took charge? Yes, was the answer. So he's inherited this situation with Mikkelsen as well. Quite clearly, his one and only focus this year is in delivering titles for Hyundai. So what's he done? Well, he's basically said our strongest team for the opening tarmac round, which is Corsica, is clearly, quite clearly, Thierry Neuville, Danny Sordo, and Sebastian Loeb. What does that mean? It means Mikkelsen doesn't get a full season. We were led to believe that there were potentially, the rumour said that there was potentially serious discussions, shall we say, between Mikkelsen's management and the management at Hyundai about the terms of this year's contract and what Hyundai were actually contractually obliged to deliver to Andreas Mikkelsen. That is what we were led to believe. Now, there must be some flexibility in that contract because Mikkelsen has effectively been dropped. Is it right? Is it fair? It depends on whose shoes you're in. If you're in Mikkelsen's shoes, you'd say no. If you were in Mr. Adamo's shoes, if you were in the shoes of the boys back in Korea who are paying many tens of millions a year for this project, you would say, yeah, we have to do all we can. We have to be ruthless in our pursuit of these titles. The driver's title is going to be very difficult, very, very difficult, and I'll come to that later. The manufacturer's title with a potential lineup and the lineup that's there now, the potential lineup that could be there in the future at Hyundai, the manufacturer's title is a real possibility. But to do that, they have to consistently play their strongest team. And without any doubt whatsoever, their strongest team come Rally Corsica and Germany and Spain when it comes down to it. are the two tarmac specialists, Sordo and Loeb, and Neuville. So you have to say, what does this mean for Andreas Mikkelsen? Well, he's been under a great deal of pressure. Listen, he came to the Hyundai team on a real high. He'd been left out, he'd been dropped for the 2017 season effectively. He was the refugee from the fallout of the Volkswagen departure, the man who didn't have a drive, the only one that didn't. He came back, he did a few R5 outings, he then came back and we saw him driving the Citroen and he got a really strong podium in Germany that year. And then somewhat surprisingly, he was taken on by Hyundai. And, there was a lot of talk, a lot of hype. It was a strong team at Hyundai, and Mikkelsen was the man who was going to be the one to challenge for titles alongside Thierry Neuville. And it just hasn't clicked for him. It really hasn't clicked. I was looking back through the stats, and one podium in, very nearly 2 years now. Rally Sweden last year, since he joined Hyundai, one podium is not a good enough return. There is no question that is not a good enough return. Why is that? Why is it that Mikkelsen has failed to deliver what we all wanted to see, what Hyundai expected to see? Well, it's a lot to do with the car. Mikkelsen just hasn't got to grips with the car. Now, to be fair to Mikkelsen, he's not the only one. Don't forget that Hayden Paddon, in his first year, failed to get to grips with the car. There were all sorts of other factors affecting Paddon that year. But he failed to get to grips with that car. I haven't really seen a confident Mikkelsen in the Hyundai. Even in Sweden this year, where he took, fourth place, never looked entirely comfortable. He certainly didn't look entirely comfortable in terms of pushing the boundaries, pushing the car to the edge, which is what he needed to do to hold on to that second place. He had a charging Neuville behind him, he had a charging Esa-Pekka Lappi behind him, and Mikkelsen wasn't able to push the car to the limit. He'd found a comfortable pace and it wasn't good enough to hold on to that podium. As I said earlier, I think that's perhaps down to the car. In fact, I know it's down to the car. The car is not a bad car. Don't get me wrong. How can it be a bad car? Thierry Neuville, the last 2 seasons, has been runner-up in the championship, has won many rallies in that car. It is blindingly fast. It does seem to have a bit of an Achilles heel, and that seems to be the front end. What we hear a lot from Hyundai drivers is that the car understeers. The front end grip, traction at the front end and grip at the front end seems to be a little bit missing. Now, you talk to anyone who studied the videos, who goes into the stages, particularly in Sweden at the weekend, and they'll tell you that the Toyota, as it hit the corners and the apexes, the front end was glued in and off they went. Maximum traction, maximum grip. You compare that with a Hyundai and the front end struggled. They struggled to get it into the apex. They struggled to hold it in the apex. The car drifted as it came through the corners. That clearly isn't the most efficient way. Now, there are drivers, and I'll tell you who in particular, Thierry Neuville, who can deal with that. And he drives through it. That is the brilliance of Thierry Neuville. We must not for 1 second underestimate how good Thierry Neuville is right now. He's on the edge. He's on the ragged edge. He is prepared to push through these potential traction handling problems that car has. And he's prepared to have huge moments and then get straight back on it. That 360 he had in Variasen, he was pushing in that stage. He identified that stage as being an opportunity. He pushed like hell. He had the 360. 99% of other drivers would then throttle back and say, I'm just going to get this car to the end of the stage. Not Thierry Neuville. Into first gear, straight off, and again pushing. And his time was quite remarkable. He drives through it. I'll tell you, the best example of that was Corsica last year. It was the most incredible drive. He fought that car through every stage in Corsica, and he got the most out of it because he was prepared to go to the limit and to face the limit and to say, I'm going to do battle at the limit, at the edge, at the ragged edge. It's not something, unfortunately, that either, you could argue, Hayden Paddon in 2017, although Paddon looked a lot more comfortable in that car last year, or more pertinently, Mikkelsen last year and this year, they're not prepared to do it. They're not prepared to go to the edge as Neuville is. That is why Mikkelsen is in the situation he's in. Now, I'm absolutely certain that Hyundai are working on that. I'm absolutely certain. They have shuffled the pack a little bit, which will help because Sordo likes the car. Loeb clearly likes the car because, he does seem to like the car. Let's say he seems to like the car. We haven't seen enough of Loeb in the Hyundai to make an assessment. But Sordo we saw last year having a great season when he was in the car. And Thierry Neuville continues to get results. But there is work to do there with the car. Now, as we mentioned Mr. Adamo earlier on, he is an enormously impressive man. I like him. I like him a lot. He's straight talking, doesn't mess around, makes decisions that are rarely compromised, even to a few degrees. He doesn't compromise. He has one objective in mind, team success. And he will deliver that for his bosses. And if that means making unpopular decisions, if that means making decisions that he has to go and fight about later on, he seems to be prepared to do that. But shuffling the pack is one thing, sorting out the engineering problems is quite clearly another thing. And I think that's probably quite high up on the list of priorities for Mr. Adamo and the Hyundai team. As I said, it's not a bad car. Let's not castigate what the engineers have done there, because it's not a bad car. It's a very, very good car. It's a competitive car. It's a winning car, but it's not a perfect car. Right now, the Toyota looks perfect. You'd have to say the Fiesta looks almost perfect. You rarely hear Fiesta drivers in the last couple of years, Toyota drivers in the last 6 months, complaining about the handling of the car. Rarely. Very, very rarely. Almost guaranteed right now that at some point during a rally, you will hear a Hyundai driver on more than one occasion talking about understeer, talking about the handling. Neuville was talking about the car, the back end of the car being like a kangaroo, doing that, bang, bang, bang on one of the stages. Again, he was still remarkably fast. He didn't throttle back. This is the difference with Neuville. The car was bucking around like whatever you want to say, a kangaroo, a bucking bronco, on the ruts. It was jumping out. It was all over the place. But he still pushed on. He still gave it 100%. He was willing to deal with whatever that basically resulted in. And we saw many incidents with him over the weekend. Still finished second. As I say, never underestimate right where Neuville is just now. What he's showing, though, unfortunately, is that car can be driven. Mikkelsen is just not prepared to go that final 0.5% that's needed. The rest of the season, well, he's there in Mexico, and my goodness me, as some people have pointed out, what an irony it will be should he go to Mexico and win. Again, that is a possibility with road position, a very tough ask. I think a podium for Mikkelsen will be a fabulous result in Mexico, a fabulous result for him in Mexico. I don't think he will win in Mexico, I really don't, but what an irony it would be if he went there. But there's no question he is under pressure. It was a decent drive in Sweden. Had he managed to hold on to that second place, perhaps show a little more fight to hold on to that second place, you'd have said it was a great drive, but it was a decent drive on the back of an enormously difficult Monte Carlo with huge pressure mounting on Mikkelsen. It was a decent drive. So what does the future hold? Well, you know what? With Mr. Adamo in charge, who knows? Who knows? Don't forget, there are drivers sitting on the sidelines who are capable of more or less jumping straight back into the championship and potentially delivering results for you. I'm talking in particular, a man who knows the car, a man who liked the car, a man who delivered results in the car last year. Hayden Paddon is just sitting. I'm sure his telephone is always fully charged, and he is just sitting waiting for that phone call from Mr. Adamo. Hello, Edon, Mr. Adamo here. That would be a nice phone call for him to get. There's also Craig Breen. He was in Sweden, and it was a difficult one for Craig. I had a good chat with him, and remember, he was on the podium in Sweden last year. Quite really unexpected podium, considering how bad the Citroen was the year before. Very difficult for him to be in Sweden this year watching, but he is there, and that puts the pressure on these other drivers who you might argue are underperforming. Let's wait and see what happens there. Now, I'll have a little sip. By the way, I've elected to use my Ford fan club mug for this one. And I'll tell you why. It's a little apology to all the Ford fans out there, because I didn't mention Ford, or M Sport in particular, in my last kitchen table, the pre-Sweden kitchen table. You know, no real reason other than after Monte Carlo, I certainly hadn't written them off, but they hadn't done anything, the 2 or 3 M Sport drivers in Monte Carlo, they hadn't done anything to get me excited. Therefore, you know what I'm like. Give me a couple of topics and I can talk for 25 minutes. Give me 3 topics and I'll be talking to you for half an hour, and no one wants to listen to me droning on for half an hour. So I have to pick and choose, and M Sport just wasn't one that really excited me before Sweden. But I have to say, the performance of, in particular, Sunonen, but also Elvin Evans, was a bit of a surprise. 5 stage wins for that car, and you know, whichever way you look at it, that young team at M Sport is dynamic. There is potential there. There are certainly stage wins. There are podiums, that is for sure. And potentially there are wins in that Fiesta this year with the lineup they've got. And I do apologise to them for not including them in my last kitchen table. I can't include everyone all of the time. I'm very sorry. So let's go on to talk about Ott Tanak. If you read motorsport news in the UK, and I will publish this column on my Facebook page probably tomorrow, maybe Friday, you will read what I think of Ott Tanak. I think he is in a class of his own right now. I really do. It's a potent combination. Tanak at the very best of his abilities. The Toyota Yaris, the cream of the crop in terms of the cars. Its drivability is right there. The power, particularly low down, is right there. The reliability now seems to be there. And Tanak is utilising all of those things very much in his favour. His drive in Sweden was intelligent. He knew he had to push that little bit harder on the Friday. Good road position on the Saturday and Sunday, and he cruised to the win. It was just the simplest, easiest win. He certainly made it look simple and easy. I've got absolutely no doubt it wasn't simple and easy. But he made it look simple, he made it look effortless, he made it look easy, because right now he is so good. He is the driver that everyone else fears. And here's what I'm going to predict. I'm going to predict that this year is Tanak's year. I hate to really bet against Sebastian Ogier because, you know, he is the master. He's the master of, he's tenacious, he sticks at it. He uses his experience, his guile, his ability to win titles. But I think this year Tanak and Toyota are just going to be too strong. And I think more than just being too strong, I think they're going to dominate. I think Ott Tanak will get better. As he gets better, as he wins more rallies, the aura around him increases. The others become a little more desperate. Take those more risky choices in the stages to try and match his speed. And Tanak will, I think, at every turn, he will win stages and he will win rallies. And he will win lots of rallies. I predict 5 or 6 this year. And I think the title will be decided probably well before Australia. Maybe Spain, maybe even GB will be the title decider. He's that good. He really is that good just now. And what he has in Chris Meek and Jari-Matti Latvala, already 2 wingmen. You know, we had to say, well, you know, any one of those 3 drivers might be the challenger for the driver's title this year. It depended on who had the best start to the season. Well, there's no question. Meek's had a very decent start, his best ever start to a World Rally Championship. Latvala's, well, not quite so good, a little disappointing, particularly after Sweden. But Tanak has had a brilliant start, leads the championship by what, 7 or 8 points I think he leads by. A win, a 3rd place, maximum points in Sweden with that power stage win. You know, the potential to go on and dominate this season. But there's a big caveat. And what is that? Road position. What we saw last year, Thierry Neuville got his nose ahead for Rally Mexico. He was first on the road in Mexico. Whoa, all went the wrong way. Then managed to get his nose ahead again a few rallies later, didn't he, when we got to Sardinia. He won brilliantly in Sardinia. But then it all went downhill after Sardinia. He only got one podium after Rally Sardinia last year. He didn't master being first on the road. I think Tanak will master the requirements of being first on the road. And I think we will see Tanak doing what Ogier did remarkably successfully for many years, which is dominating the rest of the field, even although he will start first on the road. Really, Ogier has shown us in the past that you can win from first on the road in Mexico. Every possibility that Ott Tanak will demonstrate that again. He is that good just now. He is that confident. The car is performing exactly as he wants it to perform. It's a remarkable, remarkable combination. They have gelled so well and so quickly that the others must fear. They must fear for their chances this year. Neuville's in a different place as well this year. Neuville, to me, looks better than ever. But I'm not so sure. It's not such a strong... there's not an awful lot between Neuville and Tanak. The big difference is between the Toyota and the Hyundai. And that's unfair to have them that far apart, because they're not. They are fractionally apart. And it is just one upgrade that will bring that Hyundai back on a level playing field with the Toyota. But right now, you look at the combination. Tanak and the Toyota, Neuville and the Hyundai, and there's one man that's at the top, and it's Ott Tanak. And as long as that disparity in performance of the machinery remains, then Tanak, I think, will dominate. Now, what does that mean? It means I'm writing off Sébastien Ogier. At my peril do I write him off. He's got some work to do, particularly after, 2 points in Sweden. Really has got some work to do, but he will revel in being further down the start order. That is for sure come Rally Mexico. And he'll be one of the favourites for Mexico, and he'll be right back in the championship standings. But he'll have to call on every ounce of his experience and his nous and his ability and his guile, I think, to push Tanak this year. He really will. But we'll wait and see. I could be wrong. I did predict in my last kitchen table that Toyota would dominate in Sweden. Clearly they didn't. 3 different manufacturers on the podium, which is magnificent to see. But I genuinely believe this year is Tanak's year. My goodness me, let's wait and see. Right, so that's my thoughts on Mikkelsen, my thoughts on Rally Sweden. A couple of things we've talked about in the mug, and thank you, the mugs keep coming in. There will be new mugs at the table for the next one. I'm not sure where the next kitchen table will be from, because I'm off on my travels very shortly. Off to the CAMS, which is the Australian Motorsport Federation. I'm off to their awards dinner Saturday night in Melbourne, and then a little bit of work on the Targa series, which is great in Australia, and then off to Mexico. The other thing I want to talk to you guys about, you might have noticed this sitting in front of me, UK Rally Scene, a new magazine, and it's really quite a decent magazine. Some good words, some lovely pictures, beautifully, beautifully printed as well. It really is a high quality magazine. Look it up on Facebook. Have a look for them, UK Rally Scene. It's well worth having a look at. I think you can subscribe to the magazine through Facebook. Certainly you can find out where to purchase it. Well worth a look. I've enjoyed looking through this one. So, folks, thank you very much once again. If you're watching on Facebook, don't forget to press the subscribe button. We're getting there. We're getting towards YouTube sensation, 3,276. Pretty decent for an old fella like me. If you're watching on Facebook, keep sharing. Fantastic. We're getting some really strong views. So yeah, share and like on Facebook and subscribe and like on YouTube. Folks, thank you very much once again for listening to my ramblings, stroke thoughts from the kitchen table.